Welcome to the Society for American Soccer History opening meeting at the 2020 USC convention. Founded in 1993, SASH works to promote, facilitate, and disseminate research into the rich history and heritage that is soccer in the United States. You can best find us in two places: on the web at ussoccerhistory.org and on Twitter at ussoccerhistory. You can also join, as of late 2019, via our webpage. You can hit the Join SASH button, which will bring you here. $20 membership. There are some benefits: our newsletter, early announcements, and one announcement to make is that we're going to have a soccer symposium Saturday and Sunday, April 18 and 19, 2020, at Rutgers Newark in New Jersey. Details to come via Twitter, Facebook, and our website. Before we get started with today's program, we have a great American soccer history family here, and they've brought an artifact, or three artifacts. They are team sheets, a referee report from the first World Cup, 1930. Jimmy Douglas was the goalkeeper that day. He recorded the first ever shutout in World Cup history, and we've got two relatives here today with us, Mickey and Ken Yeager. So we'd like to welcome them and thank them for bringing this artifact for us today. We have a great lineup today of speakers. Many of them are short, 5 minutes or so. We have some reflections, we have some academics working in this field, but I'm going to let David Kilpatrick talk about that lineup and introduce folks, since he was the man behind the plan. David.
Well, thank you, Tom. Welcome, everyone. I must say I'm overwhelmed by the number of people in the room. Those of you that have been to the SASH sessions in the last several years will see we've grown. I think that's very much down to the quality of the speakers that we have. When Tom just said something about short speakers, I thought he was talking about me in particular. Some of us will have a little more elevated approach to this, but I think we've got a really fun program here. The first two speakers will be speaking. The first one will be talking a little bit more about leading up into the future, which is a concern, of course, for many historians. Beau Dure, with the most provocative book title conceivable. He'll be talking about that project. Arnold Ramirez will be talking about his career in the game in a kind of an experimental format that we're really excited to roll out today. Dr. Joe Mapnick is here. We are in Baltimore, around the corner where the Blast played so many games, so we thought it would be a real blast, excuse the pun, to get a little indoorish from there on. Steve Holroyd, who is not a very short speaker. He's a much taller speaker. We'll give the Philly perspective. Tom, who you just heard from, will give a little bit more of a Jersey perspective, and if time allows, I'll say something about New York, which is probably really good to limit me, those of you that have heard me speak in the past. So we will begin then with Beau Dure. Oh, you got the phone? All right.
5 minutes, really? It'll take me. Okay, it'll take me 5 minutes to thank everybody, because like David, I remember coming, believe, to this very convention center, and it was me, Roger, and Jack, and that was about it. And thanks to David and Tom in particular, really built this organization into something great, and they even welcome those of us who are just scruffy journalists as opposed to the dedicated historians that they are. It's always humbling to walk around here and see all these people dedicate so much to the game. Then you have, me, the little Snarkmeister, coming in and saying all these awful things about how we're never going to win the World Cup and so forth. And having an awful picture of it. Yeah, the PowerPoint disappeared.
No, it's on the screen, but it's not.
Huh. Okay. All right. I really should apologize to Josie Alstor one of these days, but I do love that cover. Click. Oh, and click again. I'm not sure why I separated this one. I decided to do a chart to visualize things to show how we've fallen behind and use national team wins, because I felt like that was sort of a function of not only how often a team was playing, but how successful they were. Of course, in the latter part of this, the U.S. and Mexico and Brazil play a lot more than England does, so that's why England is suddenly dropped down. But the big thing to watch is that big hole. And you may remember that the U.S. actually went 11 years without winning a game. They didn't play very often, but when they played, they were not very good. Next. Yeah, and I'm not going to belabor the history too much because people in here know it. What I've written in the book is, you could say it's a negative way of looking at it, because it's showing how soccer, despite all the heroic efforts of people in St. Louis and elsewhere to keep it alive, it was really struggling against other American leagues. In fact, there are some other things that come in. I periodically toss out how much TV rights went for other leagues, for the NFL, for Major League Baseball, and so forth, to sort of show how those sports have grown. And also show what's going on elsewhere in the world about how those have all grown, and about how we really fell behind both other sports in the U.S. and soccer around the world. What? And so, yeah, the cultural argument, the historical part is really it's the heart of the book. It's by far the longest. It has more than 100 citations. Many of you in this room are cited. But that's really geared a little bit more toward a layman. The cultural aspects are things that maybe we don't think about quite as often. Now, granted, this is something we all know, and I go into detail on ratings and so forth about how all these other sports are fairly dominant. And also it shows just how far we go to invent our own cultural identity in this country. The phrase case in point of that, do people know who this is? Right. And did Abner Doubleday really invent baseball?
No.
No. Did he ever even see it? No. But the Hall of Baseball came up with Abner Doubleday, who was a real person. He existed. He was a Civil War hero. But they invented this creation myth around baseball because we're that insistent on doing our own things. Quick. You may remember, if you're my age, that, or even more experienced, that being a soccer person was not cool. You were picked on in high school. People would say, "Why are you following soccer? What a ridiculous sport." When I started my soccer journalism career, I had a lot of people say, "Why are you wasting time on that sport? That's ridiculous." Well, now it's finally hip to be a soccer fan, but that coincides with new media and the internet, so you have this double-edged sword, where the flip side of that is, look, NBC's Premier League coverage is great. I know Rebecca, I know Kyle, they're fantastic people, but it just means that it's that much more difficult for us to build our own professional game. I actually had a conversation with people about women's soccer recently. We have a distinguished women's soccer executive here, and about how Europe is now starting to spend enough that they may start luring our players away from us. And so, even in women's soccer, it's going to be a problem. In men's soccer, it's been really difficult to build a substantial lead. I believe it's either Paul or Mike who used to say, if you think U.S. soccer is bad now, remember 1985 when we had nothing. So MLS, my first book was called this Long Range Goals, the success story of Major League Soccer. A lot of people don't like that subtitle. In retrospect, I don't like it. But the success is that it's still here. And that's something we can't really take for granted. But I'm sure a lot of you have read the book on the right, Soccer, or Offside, Soccer and American Exceptionalism. And it's written, again, by academics who know far more than I do. But it's, again, the idea that our cultural identity was built on our own sports. And there are other works, Franklin Foer or Simon Cooper have both written about how people who came to the U.S. from other countries They didn't want to play soccer. He thought it was foreign. They had to play American sports to fit in. And so that has really, and that has really forged a lot of things here. And also, we're insecure about our soccer identity. I mean, Lexi Lawless talks about this, how we beat ourselves up more than just about any other place. Our pro league isn't like other pro leagues. Our national team isn't as good. These are things that, they happen, and we just beat ourselves up a bit more because we don't really have a history that we can lean on. Quick. And then we have so many organizations that come in. The story I like to tell was being at this convention maybe 5 years ago. And there were some people from Germany giving a presentation. They were asked, what's the biggest difference between U.S. and German soccer? And this person said, well, in the U.S. you have all these different organizations that want to have a say in things. U.S. Youth Soccer, U.S. Club Soccer, MLS, NASL, USL. They all have a say in it. In Germany, and he held up one finger, this is a more accurate portrayal of what we have in U.S. soccer, where everyone's at each other's heads, and it results in, click, we can't stop suing each other. That is one of many lawsuits that are in there. If you don't follow Stephen Bank and Mickey Turner on Twitter, I highly recommend that you do, because soccer law, this is the epicenter of soccer law. Even before they came around, Ted Philippakos wrote a great book called On Level Terms that had 10 landmark soccer lawsuits. 5 of them were in the United States. And that was before what you have now with the famous or infamous news that broke last month, that a big chunk of U.S. soccer's budget being in a deficit now, which part of it was intended, part of it was not. The part that was not intended is they're spending an awful lot of money on legal fees. Okay? Let's not just, okay, hold on just on that for a second. One reason I did this book was out of the 2018 U.S. soccer presidential election, there were a lot of good ideas floating around, but a lot of people thought that they would fix everything. And one of the points in this book is to point out that, look, there are historical and cultural reasons why we are where we are. It's not just a question of a coach. It's not just a question of a U.S. soccer president. There's so much to it. You see all the different ways people come up with promotion and relegation. Yes, I do talk about promotion and relegation in this book, even though I probably shouldn't. And I'm agnostic on it. I think it'd be cool. I don't think it'll solve everything. That's what I go into in the book. The second part here, focus on passing, no weight dribbling. One of the first conventions I came to, Claudio Reyna presented the new curriculum for U.S. soccer. And in that he said that we didn't want to over-dribble, as he put it. Wanted to focus more on passing. And the coaches just looked at him like he was crazy because they'd been taught, no, we need to go one-on-one. So we veer back and forth between what we focus on. Probably should be both, but again, the quick fix. All right, so hire Jurgen Klinsmann. This has come up several times today already. And then when that doesn't work out, again and again, fire Jurgen Klinsmann. So one of those was going to solve everything, right? And Jurgen just said recently he would have gotten the U.S. to the semifinals. Anyone here think Jurgen Klinsmann would have gotten the U.S. to the semifinals of the past World Cup? Anyone? No. All right, but this one, most of the book has a lot of citations in it. Everything from the work you guys have done to Monty Python and the Holy Grail. But this chapter was more of a personal observation from years of being around the sport, which is that we're so serious. We want to fix everything by putting in this really rigid methodology and really drilling into people's heads they need to take this so seriously. And then that's what it looks like. It ends up with a lot of kids that go in and they quit. What do we hear? We're losing players by age 13. And one of the reasons is it's not fun anymore. And some people may argue, well, in other countries it's not fun either. What's Brazil known for? What do you think of when you think of Brazilian soccer? Jogo bonito, the samba. It flows. I used to tell the kids that I coached, I said, I'm holding behind my back what most kids in the world would consider the greatest toy they could get for Christmas. And they'd say, what? And bring out a soccer ball. They'd look at me like I was crazy. But it is. And the rest of the world, again, click. Oh, sorry, Anyway, the click there was England, you know, their anthem is Always Look on the Bright Side of Life, the Monty Python song. Right. So, and I don't know how much you know the Monty Python reference, but of course it's to Life of Brian when everyone's about to die, but they sing Always Look on the Bright Side of Life. And it is heard a lot from European terraces because in England, people embrace their underdog status. If you go to see Torquay United, you're not seeing a team that's going to win the Premier League anytime soon. But they treasure the triumphs that they have. And we have triumphs to treasure. 2002, World Cup. 2009, beat Spain. You know, these are all things to be proud of. Women's team, very, very good. I do go into the book about how that might not continue for some of the same reasons that the men's team struggled. So, all right, and then to wrap up, I had just some interesting things that I found as I was going through here. I wanted to see how much newspapers in the past really covered soccer, and I found some wonderful clips here. The Brooklyn Daily Eagle has, you see in the middle of the page, there's a wrap-up of essentially some American ASL, and this was beyond the ASL of the 20s, so it was really big. So they were covering it, but newspapers in those days covered everything. You see Panthers snap losing streak, beating Chiefs. That's roller derby. Next. Yeah, same issue. You have a Wire report from Athens, Ohio. Again, this is a Brooklyn newspaper, of the Pi-Fi girls winning the Powder Bowl tip using language that even by that era I think would be considered selfish or sexist. You know, the Pi-Fi girls, unmindful that it's dangerous to make a pass at a woman. It's just that just gives an idea of how much was in newspapers in those days and how soccer was trying to fit into what was already a crowded landscape. Next. This is the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the day the U.S. beat England in the World Cup. This was not Denton Skimming's report, that came later. You know, there wasn't modern technology for him to file right away, but this was when they got the Wire story, and it's, I think this guy looks remarkably like Babe Ruth, the guy who caught the 47-pound fish. And, but I did want to point out also there's a wonderful sidebar down here. You can't see it there, but the headline is London Writers Weep, which I very much enjoyed. Click, and I think that is it. I don't want to just plug the book and nothing else, but the book is available Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Roman.com. I have to duck out early to do a book signing before the beer hall, exhibit hall, opens at 6. So I'm glad Tom's recording everything so I can see this later because we have a great line of speakers after me. Thanks very much.